you really are leaving, you're leaving a legacy, you're leaving that connection to other people, and you're keeping those traditions alive. And whether some people will say, oh, I never had kids, nobody's going to care about my story, but that's not necessarily true either. People have a great interest in the past, in history, and learning from that. Hello, my name is Amy Natt. I am the CEO of Aging Outreach Services, and this is All Things Aging.
And I'm Amy Obst, editor of Outreach NC, our monthly publication. And today we're talking about something exciting, which is a life well lived and how we document the journey of our lives.
Yes.
So, I love writing and I love stories.
Yes.
So I'm excited to talk about this.
It's a good topic.
So,
show my glasses though.
I'm sure that a lot of people have either considered this or have considered it and thought, where do we even start? So let's start with, as a person reaches their later years, what are some of the emotions that they may be trying to process? Because a lot of storytelling is emotional.
Right. And I think the thing that I love, I've been in the field of aging now for over 30 years. And I think the thing that I love about and that drew me to it is everybody's story is very unique. Sometimes we tend to lump older people all in one category, but the reality is really they've lived the longest. They have so many different experiences, emotions, and feelings. And so recognizing that and starting to tap into that and then helping them to sort of document and journal that story is sort of what we'll talk about today.
Well, I've heard a lot of people say, everybody was in the war or everybody had kids, but every person's version of that is different and unique.
Yeah, and you have to think everyone's experience as they get older is also very different. And we'll talk a little bit later in the podcast about what some of those theories are and sort of how we can help people at the end of life. But, for some people, it is a very challenging and difficult experience. They're experiencing grief, they're experiencing loss, sometimes anger, sometimes fear, regret, right? Sadness, things that maybe they're looking back and reflecting on. But then there are also those people who are really experiencing a more meaningful life. They really feel fulfilled later in life. They see their kids, they see their grandkids, things sort of happen the way that they thought that they would. There's gratitude and love. There's forgiveness maybe for things in their life or people in their life. And so for some people, those positive emotions lead them toward sort of closure and feeling really satisfied at the end of life. But for those people who maybe did experience unexpected grief or loss, it can be a very different journey.
Right. And I've noticed that sometimes the negative overshadows. We remember a very negative thing. And sometimes when we can process that, we widen the aperture and then we can remember all of the positives
and
that either came out of it. Right. And so that's a really nice way to process some of that, especially later in life when it can get really heavy.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's important.
How does quality versus quantity of life impact life decisions?
Right. So if you think about it now compared to say 50 years, 100 years ago, like people are living a lot longer, right? So it's not uncommon now for people to live to be 100. It used to be a really special thing.
Right.
They would have the birthday of the month jam club. I can't remember that.
I forgot about that.
But now it's very common for people to live to be 100. And so now we have the issue of, okay, we can help people live longer, but it becomes quality versus quantity. And so part of sort of acknowledging somebody's story and somebody's experience is understanding for that person, where is that focus for them, right? Because for some people, they're very adamant that quality of life is more important, and they have very specific living wills, advanced directives of what they would or would not want at the end of life. And so, but for other people, they want to hold on. Maybe they have unresolved issues they're dealing with. Maybe it's a fear of death or mortality. But for some people, they're more focused on quantity, and maybe they're willing to do things that would extend or prolong life. And so it's important to understand what a person's mindset is and why, so that you can, again, sort of guide them in their journey and get toward more of those positive emotions that somebody might feel, so that even if there is longevity, there's still some quality there.
I think one of the myths about storytelling and documenting a life well lived is that it's for other people.
Right.
But a lot of it
it's
is
very
a sense
therapeutic for
of
yourself.
fulfillment. So talk a little bit about how you can help an older family member kind of get there.
Right. And a lot of, if you ask, in an earlier podcast when we were interviewing a gentleman who was, I think he was beyond 100, maybe 102. And sometimes when you ask people to talk about their life, to them, it was just a normal life and they don't understand what was sort of special about it. And so I think validating that person's feelings and their experience and helping them understand that it was unique and it is special and it is something that other people want to hear about. And when you can get them sort of reflecting and reminiscing, you're helping them realize the value that they had, and you're helping them see sort of those quality experiences and foster connections with other people through those experiences and through those memories. And so really, if you are just valuing what their experience was, their feelings about it, it's a really unique journey, whether they realize it or not.
Well, and I think that when we all have stories in our minds that we've kind of rehearsed, we've told the story internally and externally a lot. And when you tell it to somebody else who doesn't know it and they ask questions, it really fleshes that story out. And so listening is a big part. Like actively listening.
Definitely. Actively listening and validating what those feelings are and embracing, like you said, the good and the bad, right? So some people have something that maybe they look back on and it does cause sadness or regret, but acknowledging and allowing them to express that to try to help them process through it is very important and of great value too.
I've had a lot of people say, I don't want to talk about that. I remember my grandfather, I wanted to hear all about World War II. And he was like,
there's some sensitive off.
I don't want to talk about that. And my great aunt said, I rolled some bandages there. That's what you're getting. And how do you encourage older people to tell their story?
Yeah. So I think one of the important things is you can't push somebody to talk about something that maybe they're not comfortable with, or maybe again, there is that underlying fear of the emotions that's going to bring up for them. So you need to be respectful of what their journey is. And so sometimes that means when we're encouraging somebody, and we'll talk about ways to do that, but you're allowing them to do it on their timeline. So you're not just sitting down in one day and getting their whole life story, and expecting them to sit there and do that in this long period of time. Maybe you're looking at, 30-minute coffee or tea that you have with somebody, and maybe you focus on one area of life, and then the next time you talk, you focus on another area. Asking open-ended questions is super important, and just listening. We have a tendency to jump in or to think we know the story. And so, or when things get uncomfortable, we try to fill that silence. And so allowing them the time and the pace to express kind of what their journey and experience was, and then having some good questions to prompt if it does get uncomfortable, where you can sort of lead them to maybe something else that they want to talk about.
A lot of memory is recall, and sometimes it takes a little bit of time as you're processing the story yourself to kind of get those details, and they kind of come slowly. Yeah.
And sometimes maybe there's certain prompts, right? If somebody is having a difficult time remembering certain things, sometimes we'll talk about, okay, well, let's look at it generationally every 10 years, right? Your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, and maybe there's family that can sort of supplement what key things were in that lifetime that you can use as prompts to help somebody tell their story.
Yeah. When I was maybe 12, it was before phones or any kind of technology, so there was nothing to do. And my maternal grandmother had written her life story, and my mom gave it to me to read, and I read it all. Oh yeah. And as we're talking, the images from that story are coming up of her keeping big ice blocks with hay to keep the food cold. And she had cancer multiple times, and I loved reading that. So what are some of the benefits of leaving a legacy for the other generations?
Yeah, it definitely, there's a lot of times we think of, the older, the matriarchs, the patriarchs, these people in our families, they're really the keepers of tradition in the family. And there's things that occur right in our own life right now, that we don't realize that in generations to come are going to be very different. And so just like you said, the ice blocks, the hay, no cell phones, rotary phones, whatever it is, right? In our generation, we don't realize that it's going to be different years to come. And so you really are leaving a legacy, you're leaving that connection to other people, and you're keeping those traditions alive. And whether some people will say, oh, I never had kids, nobody's going to care about my story, but that's not necessarily true either. People have a great interest in the past, in history, and learning from that.
Well, and also we, as a counselor, people's parents and grandparents' stories affect
Sure.
their well-being today. And sometimes knowing those, I'll ask them a question and they'll go find out. And they found it very soothing.
Yeah.
They can kind of see the pattern or how something happened.
Yeah, there's a lot that obviously passes from generation to generation. And so having that history can be very important, not only for the person providing it, but for the generations to come.
So when we talk about storytelling, I think it's easy to dismiss, I guess, the validity of it, but there are a lot of theories and a lot of research backing it.
Yeah, so I actually just finished a class that talked about a lot of these, and that's what sort of prompted me not only to think about this. It's something we've done with clients over the years and helping them tell their story, but even in starting to look at how I might tell my own, right? So that I have that. But if you look at sort of what some of the science behind it says, right, or what some of the counseling theories, there was something called dignity therapy that was developed mainly for terminally ill people, but it's very applicable to older adults as well. And so what they were doing with people when they were coming into a more clinical setting like yours is they were doing these, kind of 30-minute sessions, but they were helping people create a narrative of their life based on their life experiences and using that as a therapeutic way, maybe to, again, resolve unresolved issues or deal with things that maybe you didn't realize you were holding on to, grief that you had, underlying fears that you had, things from your own childhood, and helping people come to terms with that. And so the goal of dignity therapy was really helping people capture kind of what their thoughts and feelings were, and then they could process those. And so while it's something that was developed, for work with people that were terminally ill, it's also been very helpful in helping older adults kind of do that legacy creation. Yeah. One of the other ones that I remember from grad school was Erik Erikson and his kind of 8 psychosocial theories of these stages that we go through in life. And so for him, he talks about the last one as being integrity versus despair. And you can tell that he developed this theory before people were living so long because he used the age of 65.
Oh my God.
to mark sort of end of life. So I would say now what I see is more people in their 80s and 90s that are sort of at that final phase where it is really integrity versus despair, right? You have somebody at the end of life and people have those different experiences. So how do you help them reach integrity, right? How do you help them have that closure, have that sort of positive end of life reflection where they can feel good about things and be at peace with things? And so there are a lot of theories that have emerged on the value of helping somebody kind of walk through that as they get older. And so storytelling became one way that people would do that. And it's had such a positive impact, both in therapeutic settings and just in kind of more casual settings, that it's something I hope more people will focus on.
I do too, and I'm looking forward to reading yours.
It might take me a while to do it, but
let me know if you need any help.
Yeah.
So what are these?
Yeah, so there's different ways. So people ask a lot, well, okay, how do I do this? And, again, if you're dealing with an older person that is experiencing a lot of grief and loss, then it's a good idea for that person to be in a setting where they're really guided by a professional, a counselor, someone who can help really walk them through that and have the skill set needed to help them process that. If you're just working on helping grandma or grandpa or your neighbor that you've become close to, or somebody that you just respect, right, an older adult that you think's had a super cool life and you want to help them tell that story, there's a few different ways. And so some of it depends on what that person's willing to do. There are certainly like this, you can sit and video somebody, right? With iPhones and everything else, it becomes pretty easy today where you can sort of have interview questions and you can video talking to that person. There's some really cool ones online where people have put music to it and they've sort of added some, graphic images of maybe photographs of them when they were younger. So, and again, you can go, there are professionals that will do really professional videos, or you can do it at home.
Right.
But you can guide them through sort of that process and have it on video, which again is super cool to be able to look back, especially if you have extended family and generations to come. There are people who are more comfortable writing. And so maybe if you're not comfortable talking about something out loud, maybe you could just journal, right? Like you said, your grandmother. They also make all these books, right? So there's a ton of these, but there are a lot of books out there. This one is Tell Me Your Story, Dad. This one is my story and legacy, threads of my life. And so this one's in large print, which I appreciate. But when you go through these, right?
It's some structure so it doesn't feel just like an overwhelming.
Yeah, you're asking, what are my earliest memories? It's kind of like we used to do baby books when kids were born. And so, but these are geared toward older adults and helping them tell their story and leave their legacy. And so these prompt the questions, right? So if somebody's having difficulty, this one I liked so much, that's the one I'm going to do. So some of them are meant to be self-guided, but I've also worked with clients where maybe we purchase the book and we sit down every week and we fill out a different chapter. And then at the end of the year, it was a gift that they gave to an adult child or a grandchild or a family for Christmas. So kind of like you would do family genealogy, right? This is just taking it a little bit further. I have some people that have maybe younger grandchildren or children, and so maybe they do more of a scrapbook,
right,
with a more hands-on project. I've even had people do shadow boxes where maybe a grandparent and grandchild for Grandparents' Day were going through the home and collecting items from that person's life, and then they could tell the story based on that. Right.
This would be neat too to do in a multi-generational, like my mom and me and my daughter all telling. Like the question here is, my favorite comfort food. What's your favorite comfort food?
Me? Maybe pizza? I don't know. It's a good question. See?
Mine's candy. What's your favorite snack food?
I think pizza is a snack food too.
Candy. But yeah, it would be great to have answers from all the generations.
Yeah. And the great thing about some of these kind of guided storytelling books is it can be more informal, right? And again, you don't have to fill out the whole thing. There are some that are definitely more kind of fun, but don't just like give this to your dad for Christmas and think he's magically going to fill it out, because most people will just look at it and be like, sometimes it does take kind of some prompting and, hey, let's do it together. Right. Or, I'll do a chapter this month, you do a chapter this month. And it's a process over time. But yeah, the information that you get, the little things that you don't think about.
Oh, yeah.
Especially in like multi-generational families where you can look back and go, oh my gosh, my great grandma loved chocolate pudding. So do I. Or here's a family recipe that I never knew about.
One other thing is I've done this professionally, like a couple of people have hired me and their parents didn't want to talk about what they wanted them to talk about. They just said, nah,
their own
talk
story.
About that. I'm not getting into it.
Yeah.
And it's hard to respect that, but I do think that this is the person's story.
Yeah.
And they have some agency over that.
Definitely. And again, the goal of this is you're helping that person kind of come to a place in life where they're at peace with things, right? And so helping them process maybe there's a lot of estrangement and so forth that happens sort of in those kind of middle years sometimes. And so it's a way to kind of, again, bring that family piece back to full circle and help them process maybe unfinished business. And that's really the goal, right? At the end of life is we want to capitalize on what was the wisdom, what were the lessons learned, what were the little things that made that person unique and made that experience their own. And there's great value to the person and, like you said, to the family members. So highly encourage it.
Thank you. It's always very informative. I could keep talking to you for hours.
Thank you.